We're going to talk a little bit about healthcare now. So with an aging population in rural areas, what specific measures will you advocate for to improve senior living facilities, home care options, and important to all, access to overall healthcare services in the boundary-similkameen region?
Thank you. We know, I think in places like Keremeos, we know that it is better if we could stay in our own communities. Our parents both went through the process of going, as my daughter's nodding, so I was going to say mine, went through the process of having to move away from home to get into long-term care facilities or supportive living situations. That's difficult, especially when the initial suggestions were they were going to have to go to a different community. And so we, in terms of recognition of that the value, the fact that people need to be surrounded by their friends and family, we have committed to expanding United Way's Better at Home program, which has been doing great things around the province. We're committed to expanding the network of home care, and so the nurses and the physiotherapists and so on can come into your home. We're committed to something like a hospital at home program, which means that when you get out of hospital, you get home sooner. So those are the kinds of pieces on the home support side of things. And on the other part of the question was around, I think around things like long-term care. Like, so that announcement that I mentioned earlier, 200 new beds in Penticton, that's a 20% increase in long-term care beds for the region. We won't stop expanding and investing in long-term care beds for our communities, but those matter, right? It matters that you're not on a waiting list for 12 months in order to get into long-term care. So it is recognizing that in order to provide those supports, government needs to be investing in people, in our seniors, to give them the support they need.
I can't remember the exact stat. Let's point out, it's, I think, a difference of almost $23,000, don't quote me, but in that ballpark, cheaper to have somebody visit a home 2 hours a day than it is to have them in a long-term care bed. And so BC Greens would like to expand funding and train more professionals and create standards so that there's more opportunity for people to age in place, more tax incentives and money available to retrofit your home and make it livable longer into your life, as well as expanding long-term care beds and making the companies that are providing that care, that are for-profit, more accountable for those receiving public funds, striving for accountability and transparency. Where is that public funding going? Ensuring that it's being spent on seniors, on care, and not ending up just as profit, and establishing standards of care across the province that all seniors in BC, if you're in an assisted living environment, need to be well looked after. You're entitled to a standard of care, and you should feel confident in what you're receiving. And so it's creating equity across the province, encouraging people and providing support to stay in your home longer, and creating more space and a healthier, safer environment when you are in a care facility.
So I spent 16 years in the emergency department, and when you look at the capacity issues being faced by our province right now, the fact that several thousand nurses, allied healthcare professionals, doctors were fired during the mandates has not helped the situation. Okay? In Grand Forks, inpatient services were shut down for over 2 years. They've recently reopened. I don't think they're at full capacity again. But you look at these surgical programs that have been shut down, hospitals have shut down, emergency room closures. This has harmed a lot of British Columbians. And we saw that, leading into the election, these mandates were lifted. I think we were the last jurisdiction in the world to do that. With Bill 36, the new Health Professions Act, they have taken a lot of those things that were in the mandates and they have put it onto the governing bodies. So you have the College of Physicians and Surgeons, the College of Nurses and Midwives. We've got about 15 colleges in the province here that govern the professional bodies. Under this new Healthcare Provisions Act, they're going to amalgamate them, have no more elected membership, all government appointees, And this is disincentivizing nurses, doctors, and allied healthcare workers from coming and working in our jurisdiction. I would suggest that you go and look at Bill 36. It's alarming. It's alarming. And the fact that this has been done kind of under the radar, talking with doctors and nurses and pharmacists on the campaign trail, very few are actually aware of it. But I would encourage you to go home and read it, and you'll see a hint of things to come.
Continue with healthcare here. Mental health and addiction issues are growing concerns across BC, including in rural areas. What specific plans do you have to expand mental health and addiction services in boundary-similkameen, ensuring they are accessible to everyone in need?
Mental health and addiction. I think I've just started working, not nearly so much experience here as Sean, but for the last year now I've been working with BC Ambulance. And so sometimes having face-to-face interactions with folks who are dealing with mental health and addiction challenges. And firstly, to me, they're people. If you look at the statistics and their background, very frequently you'll have a history of trauma. Very frequently you'll have other minoritizing factors, as well as experience with youth protection, foster care. These are people that we're failing, and if we ask ourselves what's reasonable, what's the bottom rung, what do we expect as an outcome, how do they get back on their feet? It's a challenging question. I think we have to first ask ourselves, what's a reasonable process? What's a form of treatment and help that they can choose, that preserve their autonomy, that can help build them back up? And then we have to ask, how do they get housing in the community? How do they get employment in the community? And so I feel a little uneasy with other ideas recently from other parties that talk about involuntary care. Because there's a separation between addictions and mental health and criminality. And you're talking about a form of taking away a person's freedoms, and I think that has to be done very, very carefully. We first have to do everything we can to provide support with that.
The leading cause of death from 15 to 59-year-olds in this province is opium overdose. And the government response has been to dump an unprecedented amount of narcotics on the street in the form of safe supply. This seems counterintuitive to me. The Green Platform is to increase that supply and add benzodiazepines to the mix. Addiction is a disease. I think you can judge a society by how well it treats its most vulnerable. And when you go downtown Vancouver, over by Leon and Kelowna,
you don't have to go there.
Yeah, it's everywhere, right? And throwing incredible amounts of narcotics at it, incredible amounts of money at it, is not doing nothing but making this problem worse. Okay? It is a disease, but it's a disease of choice. Okay? And when you have... Okay, well, no one's putting that needle in their arm. Okay? And we've created an environment that exacerbates this problem. You don't get to destroy our communities as well. This is, again, we go back to the 70s. We used to take care of people, right? And then someone came up with a really cool idea how money we'll get rid of all these facilities and they'll be treated in the community and the money will follow people in the community. But the money didn't follow them.
Yeah.
People got paid and these people were abandoned.
Yeah.
Right? The strategies we're using aren't working. And there is criminality involved. I dealt with this day in and day out in the emergency room and on the streets as a paramedic. Right? What we're doing isn't helping.
So I, in this position over the last 4 years, had the opportunity to hear some pretty heartbreaking, devastating stories where people that have lost their children to overdose, to a toxic poison drug supply. So I beg to differ significantly from what we just heard. But the question is, how do we help? I think, how do we help? How do we help support those people? As Kevin said, you know, there are a lot of opportunities, there are a lot of different spaces that we can provide that. And we know that if we can provide the right support, it not only is going to save those lives, it's also going to save us money. Right? So this notion that somehow we can ignore it all and it'll go away is not true. It's going to kill people, and it's going to cost an enormous amount of money for us and our communities. And so the opportunity, I think, is to say, how do we move forward in a better way? It is through avenues like Safe Supply, but it also is through avenues like treatment centers, expanding the number of beds in this province as we have done and as we will continue to do to get people into treatment when they need it. Right? It is also, I would say, you know, there are a small number of people out there that are a danger to themselves or to the people around them. And there is space to say, okay, we need those people in a secure care environment. This is what somebody in Princeton, a mother in Princeton that lost her son, asked me. She said, why can we not do that? And so we've understood that, okay, there is room for that, right? But it is only, again, as Kevin said, after we have exhausted all of these other options to be able to provide a better environment to help support these people. And it does mean that these people, that's not the criminality here, right? It is the drug dealers, right? It is the gangs. These are the opportunities and these are the spaces that we have been coming down hard on to get these out of our system, to get the toxic drug supply gone from our communities, keep people safe.
Okay, next we have Indigenous relations. What steps will you take to ensure that the province's commitments to reconciliation with Indigenous communities are fulfilled in the boundary-similkameen, particularly in terms of land rights, long-term partnerships, economic development, and cultural preservation?
When you look at our paternalistic Indian Act, we need to develop a new relationship going forward. We've been there for a long time. You've seen this UNDRIP and DRIPA come in, and we see these issues presenting themselves in other jurisdictions around the world. And these supranational organizations are using divisive tactics to push their agendas internationally. Okay? I think we can come up with a better domestic answer to these problems, and that comes with, you know, coming to the table and coming up with a new relationship moving forward. There's been a push for that federally. There's been a lot of talk about it provincially, and you know, talking with Indigenous leaders. I worked in Indigenous communities for a large portion of my life up in northern Alberta, and you know, we need a new way forward. I look at what's being discussed right now in the news and promises that are being made, and you see these relationships, and it doesn't seem to be taking us in a good direction.
I think we see the changes. The world is a different place than it was 50 years ago. And there's a recognition in a place like here with boundary-similkameen in Yunnan, for example, there is a recognition of reconciliation coming together and working well for the betterment of everybody. And so we see this in opportunities across the province. I think that that is at the heart of what reconciliation means. I do wish the Conservative candidate were here, because I also sit across the aisle from the leader of the Conservatives, and he has made his decision very clear, that he is going to rip apart DRIPA. DRIPA is our legislation that guides our process for embedding reconciliation throughout the things that we do in British Columbia. And the outcome of ripping that piece of legislation up means that we will get sued over and over and over again as a province, and we will lose every time. Rights and title is not ambiguous. DRIPA is our way of navigating through that process in a good way for the nations and for everybody else in this province. And so the opportunity, we could speak about the mines that are getting opened up in northwestern BC because of good relationships between the Indigenous nations and the other people in those places, to be able to say, here's what we want to do, and we're going to move forward, and it's going to be one of those rising tides that lifts all boats. So the opportunities are enormous, I think, but we have to be walking into that relationship with respect. And I see a lot in the province right now that is not doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. DRIPA is very important. And if you've read through it and read through UNDRIP, it's about starting where we're at and moving forward together. And it's a legal framework. Like Raleigh says, it's about avoiding lawsuits. It's about being able to move forward with confidence so that as projects are announced, they're developed in partnership. We know it's safe to invest. We know it's safe to proceed. We can navigate the hurdles together. And that may be extra work, but if we do it in the right way, we're not spending so much time, energy, resources fixing mistakes. One thing in particular that the Greens envisioned with respect to power, we need more hydropower, we need more electrical generation in the province, is a desire for future projects to have a 50% ownership or stake with local First Nations. If you look at the history of hydro and the areas that have been flooded, the impacts are tremendous. And we're so fortunate to have cheap electricity in the province. But there is a cost. There's an environmental cost, and there's a social cost, and there's been a tremendous cost to First Nations. And so, as an example of what the Greens believe in, it's moving forward together, involving First Nations as stakeholders, as part owners, as having an opportunity for their own economic development, and benefiting the local community and contributing to public power across the province. Thank you.
I'm on the back page, guys. Okay, education and workforce development. How would you work to improve access to education and job training programs for young people in the boundary-similkameen to ensure that they are equipped to meet the demands of the future workforce and won't have to leave the region for opportunities?
Great question. So I have had the opportunity over the last few years to work with, for example, the rural colleges from across the province. And those conversations have been around, my kind of touch point there is how do we help inspire people in rural communities to be able to do what they want to do and be what they want to do. And so about a month ago, I had the opportunity to sit around a big table with them in Vancouver and announce, for example, a new program. For the first time, all of these rural colleges around BC are coming together to say, we're going to collaborate. They haven't done this before. Collaborate to develop a shared curriculum across the province to support people in remote and rural communities. That was amazing. I looked at programs like our rural teacher training program. So we have teachers, we have people in schools right now that are not certified to be teachers. And they wish they could be, but they can't get the training. And so about 3 months ago, I had the opportunity in Nelson to sit down with the second cohort of a group of teachers that has come from all over the province. They come together just to finally meet each other. We've been in this program for a year in terms of dispersed teacher training to get their certification. One of them was from Bella Bella, one of them is from 100 Mile House. These are people that have jobs, they have families, they don't want to leave those, they don't want to uproot themselves from rural communities like Costin, for example, and have to go away to do that. So we've given them the opportunity to help facilitate them getting that training in place. That piece, I think, across the board is to say, how do we revisit the model of education in a way that works for individuals that are in places that are remote and rural. And we see, again, in all of those cases, there's a recognition, again, that the model of education looks different now than it did before, but we have to catch up. And we're in the process of doing that, and it is enormously inspiring to hear these stories of people that couldn't do that before, and they can now.
I was tremendously fortunate in university to get through 6.5 years of undergrad and have no student debt. And I did that through wildland firefighting for the province of British Columbia, and so I got to work long hours in the summer, and I made enough to pay for my room and board and pay for my tuition. BC Greens would like to create things like a youth corps, whether it's wildland firefighting, expanded positions doing that, other jobs out in the landscape, potentially in work like orcharding, or into construction, where we need a pathway for young people from all areas of the province, rural areas especially, to find employment, to be given skills training, to be able to earn money and earn enough if they wish to go to school, that's a possibility. With respect to education, often our conversation, provincially, federally, is about tuition. From my personal experience, it's not just tuition, it's the living cost. If you grow up in a town and you go to school somewhere else, tuition's a chunk of change, but your cost of living is as much or more. And so we need to be thinking about how do we support students who aren't raised in the community with the university. Programs like we're always talking about sound like a fantastic idea to bring education to smaller communities. And I think government needs to be crunching the numbers and making sure that there is a realistic path for people who want to work hard and apply themselves, that they can get the education they need, that they can find job and skills training they need, and they can come back to their communities or stay in their communities debt-free and ready to start their lives. Thank you.
I look at other provinces, Alberta in particular, and I think they do a lot better job at this. There's an incredible opportunity for partnership with private industry to be able to do apprenticeship programs, right? Specialize in my day, it was called industrial education. You could take mechanics, you could take welding, but there was no real introduction to trade with extensive training. And if someone decides not to go the college route or the university route, being able to graduate in grade 12 with your second year apprenticeship, there's programs like this all over. And when you look at the challenges facing trades, facing industry, I know they even have it with emergency services, policing. There's so many bodies needed to fill the jobs. We just don't have them, and I think we could do a lot better job by building capacity within our high schools, and have people leave with on-the-job training and be able to integrate into industry more easily.